In the last few days, we have seen some very peculiar events happening, particularly in the United States. And though they are happening there, we are talking about them here in India because if we don't wake up now, very soon such events will start happening in India also. First, we saw some of the presidents of Ivy League universities being questioned by the American senators about anti-Semitic behavior by their students and some of their faculty also. After that, there were huge protests that erupted in many American universities like Harvard, Columbia, Yale. And the government had to invite the police, the universities had to invite the police to stop those demonstrations and protests. So much for America's love for freedom of expression and democracy, the things about which they lecture the entire world and particularly India. But first sign of protests in universities, and they had to invite the police to suppress the. Senator Cruz was questioning a judge who had allowed a 6'2" tall man who was convicted as a rapist, serial rapist, but he declared himself to be a female and demanded that he should be kept in a women's cell, and the judge allowed him to be placed in the women's cell. And Senator Cruz was questioning the judge, saying that you are not a judge but a radical activist. How could somebody's objective be destruction? I mean, we believe that people behave badly in a particular situation, but somebody can be fundamentally evil is something we can't wrap our mind around. And that is where we have to understand that what is the psyche of the left? What is the psyche of Marxism? Because unless we understand that, we will never understand why do they behave in a particular manner. Actually, Marxism is all about dividing the society into oppressor and oppressed classes, then fanning the flames of conflict. Then conflict leads to anarchy. Anarchy leads to destruction. That is what Marxism fundamentally wants. And what they claim is that once the existing order, existing system, or existing human civilization is completely destroyed, then on the clean slate, they will create a new man and a new society. But so far, they have displayed no such ability. Whenever they got a chance, they could never do anything similar to creating a new man or a new society, but their regime always ended in violence, anarchy, and disruption, leading to nothing. We all know that Hitler was a racist, and we all condemn him for being a racist. But if I tell you, and Karl Marx, we always know that he's a great humanitarian, and he showed the downtrodden the path of emancipation. I mean, he has been made into some kind of a great humanitarian philosopher. But if I tell you that Karl Marx was as racist as Hitler, then probably you will not believe me. But in my book, I have given enough evidences and enough of his quotes to prove that he has spoken in such derogatory terms about Jews, about Negroes, Africans, Slavs, all the communities that Hitler hated, Marx hated even more. So that is the origin of Marxism, hatred.
Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Indic Talks, organized by Center for Indic Studies. Today, we discuss how wokeism is destroying the world. The left has redefined its strategy of fanning the flames of conflict by shifting its focus from economics to culture. They now focus on infiltrating the cultural institutions like family, religion, democracy, patriotism, and destroying them slowly from inside like termites. To discuss the same, we have our speaker and author today, Abhijit Joag, who is also the author of the bestseller book Asatyamev Jayate, that exposes with concrete evidence the many distortions in India's history. His recent book Termites traces the origin and growth of the leftist ideology, especially its current avatar of wokeism. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to take over from here.
Namaste, everybody. In the last few days, we have seen some very peculiar events happening, particularly in the United States. And though they are happening there, we are talking about them here in India because if we don't wake up now, very soon such events will start happening in India also. First, we saw some of the presidents of Ivy League universities being questioned by the American senators about anti-Semitic behavior by their students and some of their faculty also. After that, there were huge protests that erupted in many American universities like Harvard, Columbia, Yale. And the government had to invite the police, the universities had to invite the police to stop those demonstrations and protests. So much for America's love for freedom of expression and democracy, the things about which they lecture the entire world and particularly India. But first sign of protests in universities, and they had to invite the police to suppress the protests. But after that, we saw Senator Cruz, Ted Cruz, again question a judge. If you have not seen it, do search and take a look at it. It's very interesting exchange. Senator Cruz was questioning a judge who had allowed a 6'2" tall man who was convicted as a rapist, serial rapist, but he declared himself to be a female and demanded that he should be kept in a women's cell, and the judge allowed him to be placed in the women's cell. And Senator Cruz was questioning the judge, saying that you are not a judge but a radical activist. So, for making sense of all these events and all these happenings, we have to understand that the facade of wokeism behind which all these things are happening is actually nothing but the latest expression of Marxism. And before we take this further, let us try to understand what exactly is the core philosophy of Marxism, what exactly Marxism stands for. Actually, Marxism is all about dividing the society into oppressor and oppressed classes, then fanning the flames of conflict. Then conflict leads to anarchy. Anarchy leads to destruction. That is what Marxism fundamentally wants. And what they claim is that once the existing order, existing system, or existing human civilization is completely destroyed, then on the clean slate, they will create a new man and a new society. But so far, they have displayed no such ability. Whenever they got a chance, they could never do anything similar to creating a new man or a new society, but their regime always ended in violence, anarchy, and disruption, leading to nothing. So when I say this, many times, many of my friends ask me that how could somebody's objective be destruction? I mean, we believe that people behave badly in a particular situation, but somebody can be fundamentally evil is something we can't wrap our mind around. And that is where we have to understand that what is the psyche of the left? What is the psyche of Marxism? Because unless we understand that, we will never understand why do they behave in a particular manner. So in our culture, we always have two sides, God and Dev and Asur. So Devas stand for everything that is good in the universe, and Asur stand for destructive and disruptive activities. So everything that is fundamentally evil. Even in Christian theology, you have two sides, God and Satan. And since the left ideology has evolved in the West, it has its roots in Christian theology ultimately. And God and Satan are the two sides. One stands for good, one stands for evil. And all the Marxists, right from Karl Marx himself, all their ideologues have openly said that we are Satanists. They they very proudly call themselves as Satanists. So that is something that we have to understand, that these people are avowedly Satanists. Another thing that if I tell you that you will be really shocked. We all know that Hitler was a racist, and we all condemn him for being a racist. But if I tell you, and Karl Marx, we always know that he's a great humanitarian, and he showed the downtrodden the path of emancipation. I mean, he has been made into some kind of a great humanitarian philosopher. But if I tell you that Karl Marx was as racist as Hitler, then probably you will not believe me. But in my book, I have given enough evidences and enough of his quotes to prove that he has spoken in such derogatory terms about Jews, about Negroes, Africans, Slavs, all the communities that Hitler hated. Marx hated even more. So that is the origin of Marxism, hatred. You take any Marxist leader, he has again very openly said that hatred is an essential part of communism. So if you take Lenin, for example, Lenin has said that hatred is core to communism, and children should hate their parents if they are not communists. Lenin has gone on record saying this. I mean, I'm not saying anything from my own side. Everything is recorded, documented. Stalin, of course, we know that he was full of hatred. Mao, for example, you take Chairman Mao. Even in India today, we have people who call themselves as Maoists and do all sorts of violent activities. So Mao has written in his book that when he was 8, there was a Confucianist temple in his village, and all he wanted from the bottom of his heart to destroy it from its very foundations. So just imagine an 8-year-old boy having so much hatred in his mind that he wanted to destroy that temple from its very foundation. So that is the kind of mentality, that is the kind of psyche. Only those people who have this kind of psyche, they are attracted to the left ideology and to communism. So once we understand this, then we don't find it difficult to believe that their objective, their target, their ambition is to destroy the existing civilization. Now, when we come to the classical Marxism, which Karl Marx himself propounded, he said that revolution will happen from the conflict between rich and poor, or capitalists and workers. So the foundation of his conflict was economics, or economical. And he said that it will be a bloody revolution, which will come from the barrel of a gun. And workers of the world will be the leaders of this revolution. And he had also predicted that this revolution will happen in Germany and England, those two countries where industrialization had reached its peak. That is what he thought, that revolution will happen mainly in industrialized countries, and he had named that it will happen in England and Germany. But nothing of that sort happened. In fact, the first communist revolution happened in Russia, where there was practically no industrialization. It was a zamindari kind of a economy, feudal economy. And how that revolution happened is also another story. It was not a grassroots revolution, but it was imposed from top. But that is not our topic today, so let's not go there. After Russia, the revolution went to Eastern Europe, Central Asia. Nowhere in these areas there was any industrialization. And the industrialized countries of the West, England, Germany, Italy, France, they completely ignored the communist revolution. The workers there very happily participated in the prosperity that was being generated by capitalism. In the First World War and the Second World War, those workers fought for their motherland. In fact, they were willing to die for their motherland. And this was a big shock for the Marxists, because Marx had predicted that workers of the world will come together and the boundaries of nations will collapse. In fact, they wanted the boundaries of nations to collapse. They wanted the world to be one and to be under their control, under the control of Marxist ideology. But shockingly, in the First World War and Second World War, workers of England, Germany, Italy, France, all of them laid their lives for their country. Now this was a very confusing and very shocking time for them, that how come whatever Marx had said is proving to be completely untrue, and exactly opposite is happening. So they did a lot of thinking, and there was a president of Italian Communist Party. His name was Antonio Gramsci. He and there was another group of scholars in Frankfurt School. They were professors in Frankfurt School, in Frankfurt University, and that group is known as Frankfurt School. So both of them, Gramsci as well as Frankfurt School, came up with a theory that the oppressed people, the workers in Western Europe and America, don't participate in revolution, in bloody revolution, communist revolution, because they think that Western culture is their own. They own up to Western culture. Communist theory is that the current prevalent culture is created to exploit the poor people or have-nots. But it is done so cleverly that the workers and the downtrodden people think that it is their own culture, and that's why they try to defend it. So then they said that now let us change our strategy, and let's infiltrate the institutions that give strength to the Western culture. Infiltrate them, and from inside, slowly subvert them like termites, till such time that one day the whole thing will collapse. And they said that this is not going to be a bloody revolution. This will not happen. This will not come from the barrel of a gun. It will not happen overnight, but it will be a long process. We will slowly infiltrate them. We'll gnaw at their strength, and we'll subvert it in such a way that one day everything will collapse, and then we will bring our communist revolution and communist rule in the Western world. So they call this long march through the institutions. Antonio Gramsci has given a name, that this will be a long march through the institutions. Most importantly, in the 1920s and 1930s, they have written it down that how we are going to bring about this revolution. The problem is the world probably didn't read it or didn't take it seriously. They thought that this is only a academic theory or something like that. But they have written it down, that how we will infiltrate, what institutions will infiltrate. So they have said that first institution that we want to destroy is family, because family is something that gives that sustains culture. Culture is the biggest strength of culture or civilization is family. So they said that we'll destroy the family. Then they said that we'll destroy religion. Communism has always been anti-religion, but in this philosophy, I mean, in this strategy, in this theory also, they said that we'll empty the churches. In those words, they've written it down. We'll destroy patriotism. We'll destroy education. We'll destroy democracy. These are the institutions that provide strength to the Western culture. And these are the institutions that we will subvert from inside and make them collapse. And that is how we will make the Western civilization go down. There was a Professor Willy Munzenberg, who belonged to the Frankfurt School. He has said that we will make the Western civilization stink. He's written it down. And he said that we'll implement such strategies and such ideas that one day the Western civilization will start stinking. And we know here they've almost done it. So this is something which everything that has happened in the Western world, Western Europe and America, hasn't happened per course or naturally, but it has happened because of a vicious plan which was executed over a long period of time with commitment of a fanatic. Because you can't imagine normal people plan such long-term plan of destruction and implement it over generations. To do that, you have to be a fanatic. And there is no doubt that communists are fanatic, and that's why they have done it. So how did they do it? Let us try to find out. This Frankfurt School, the group of professors, when Hitler was ruling Germany, they were thrown out of the country. They went and settled in Columbia University in America. And from there, they spread to almost all the major universities in America and established their ideological supremacy in all these universities. We always think that America is a bastion of capitalism and there is no communism in America. Even today, when I talk about my book or this subject, people say that America mein kahan communism. So that is the misconception that we have. But right from that time, right from 1930s, 1940s, they've established themselves in America. Initially, they promoted something that was called as progressivism. But slowly, they actually showed their fangs. And today, they are openly propagating Marxism. So they came up with a theory which was called as critical theory. And in this critical theory, their idea was to divide the society into various groups where, every human activity and every human relationship should be seen from the prism of oppressor and oppressed, to the extent that parents are oppressor and children are oppressed. So you can imagine to what extent they have taken this whole idea of oppression. So divide the society into oppressor and oppressed groups. There should be continuous conflict between oppressor and oppressed. So whatever fault lines you have created, there has to be a conflict along those fault lines. And most importantly, they have moved the base of the conflict, base of the division from economics to culture. So in classical Marxism, the conflict was supposed to happen between the rich and the poor. So it was an economic conflict. Now it is a cultural conflict. So what are the fault lines? In America and Western Europe, white versus black. So race is one base of the conflict. Men versus women. Sex is another base of the conflict. Children versus parents. Third basis of the conflict. Religion. Majority versus minority. More and more fault lines, more and more conflict. Every single human activity, every single human relationship should be a basis for creating conflict. That was their fundamental ideology behind this critical theory. Now, the conflict group should always carry guilt. The oppressor group will always carry guilt. They made sure that such atmosphere is created, such narrative is created, that anybody who is branded as oppressor must be burdened with a feeling of guilt. And oppressed must carry victimhood. So oppressed will always be told that you can't do anything. What your condition, your situation, it's only because you are oppressed and you are a victim. Around us, if we see many people who try to overcome the adverse situation. They have the determination and desire, ambition to work hard, to work with discipline, and rise in life. But if you continuously tell such people who are have-nots that you can't do anything about your condition. It has to be, somebody else has to do it. Government has to do it. Society has to do it, because you are a victim. Then the desire to fight, desire to rise, you lose that desire itself. So half the 50% of the society is under the feeling of guilt. 50% of the society is under the feeling of victimhood. And in this manner, the entire society becomes dysfunctional. And that was the idea that they had behind this thing. So they were telling the people who were branded as oppressors that your success in life, whatever you have earned, money, fame, success, is only because of the privilege that you have. So they call it white privilege. They call it men's privilege. In India, they call it Brahminical privilege. So it's a well thought out strategy that impose guilt on these people, telling them that everything that you have earned, it has nothing to do with your ability, with your merit, with your discipline, with your effort, with your hard work, but it is only because of privilege. And the victims are told that you are not getting anything not because you are not trying or you are not working hard, but only because you are oppressed. And it is not your job to earn this, but it is the society's job or the government's job to give you all this on a platter. So that is the whole core of this philosophy. And they have also introduced a thought that there is nothing like objective reality. So there is no objective truth. Every truth, every reality, every situation is subjective. What does it mean? It means that if you are branded as an oppressor, then you can never be right. Because there are no objective norms to decide what is right and what is wrong. So if you are an oppressor, you are never right. If you are an oppressed, you can never be wrong. So we always wonder why these woke people or the left people justify everything that Muslims do. That is because they have branded them as oppressed. उनको उन्होंने शोषक बना दिया, शोषित बना दिया. और जो शोषित है वो कभी भी सही नहीं हो सकता. He can never be right. So that is the basic thought, that right and wrong, to decide what is right and what is wrong, there are no objective criteria. It's all subjective. That means whatever they say will be accepted, in short. And what they say is that, again, another very important thing is when the exploitation is based on financial or economic reasons, then those things are tangible. So if workers were earlier poor and exploited, but as their incomes rose and they joined the middle class, they became middle class, it was clear that they were no more oppressed, because it's a tangible, measurable criteria. But when it is moved to culture, when the oppressor-oppressed definition is moved to cultural reasons, then those reasons are intangible. So you can never say, even if all the laws are made to stop any oppression based on caste, race, or religion, or such cultural parameters. But still, if you tell those people that no, you are still oppressed, there is no way to prove that they are not oppressed, because these are all intangible things. So then again, a word or just a glance which is unintended can also be interpreted as oppression. So that is very smartly they have done, because now the oppressor-oppressed paradigm will never end. In most of the democratic countries, actually, the governments take affirmative action. So those who have been oppressed for a long time, they are given special privileges, special treatment. But in spite of all this, all the laws are made to make sure that there will be no discrimination. But in spite of all this, if you keep telling people that, no, look, this fellow said such and such word, or he looked at you in this way, that means he is discriminating against you or he's oppressing you. So that thought remains in the minds of people, and then they keep thinking that they are getting oppressed, and this is never going to end. So their idea of fanning the flames of conflict will never stop. So this is a very smart movement that they have done from economic to cultural reasons. And another idea that they've introduced based on this, this is something that they call as microaggression. So if even if you utter a word which is not politically correct, which is not fitting into the woke ideology, even if you utter a single word like that, then they call it a violence. They say that word can also be a violence. And that is why they say that the oppressed people, blacks, women, minorities, should have safe spaces. So their offices, their classrooms should be safe spaces, which means those who are not politically correct, those who utter some words which are not politically correct, they should not be even allowed inside these spaces. So that is how they don't allow conservative people to enter universities. If somebody says a word which is against transgenderism, that person is cancelled. That is called as cancel culture. So microaggression, political correctness, and cancel culture. These are the pillars of woke, ideal woke behavior, one can say. So it has gone to such an extent that many professors, or even outside universities also many people, they have to walk on eggshells all the time, thinking that they should not, afraid under the pressure that they should not utter a word which is not politically correct. So this entire what you call ideological terror has actually swept the American universities and America's social life. And they call themselves as woke liberals, is the biggest irony, I would say, because they have imposed this restriction on speech. You should speak whatever is approved by them. If you utter a word which is not approved by them, then your cancel means you are thrown out of the acceptable limits of social existence. You're actually thrown out of the society for all practical purposes. And there are many such examples I have quoted in my book also, that how good professors, experienced people in the corporate world had to face such extreme trolling and extreme, what do you call, bad mouthing, that many of them had to resign, many of them had to quit their jobs and move away from the mainstream of the society. So that is a kind of ideological terror that these people have unleashed in the United States, in many other Western countries also. How did they reach this kind of power, particularly in America, and then followed by America in Western Europe? Is because of the professors that I told you that they'll spread from Columbia University to all other universities. And what they did is they first took control of the institutions that teach teachers. Like we have B.Ed, M.Ed courses, which are meant for people who are going to be teachers. So such institutions, they took it under their charge and made sure that the teachers who teach the teachers are indoctrinated with their thought. So they passed on their ideology to their students, who became teachers in various schools, colleges, and other educational institutions. And when the students who studied under these teachers, generation after generation, they came into the public life, the whole mainstream narrative of America was controlled by the leftist ideology, which they have presented under the garb of wokeism, because they knew that after the fall of Soviet Union, Marxism was not going to sell. People were not going to accept Marxism as a acceptable ideology. So they created this the whole umbrella of wokeism, which is primarily attractive masks like social justice, like gender justice, like women's rights, like environment protection. All these are attractive masks behind which they implement their destructive and anarchist leftist ideology. So these professors, when they control the complete education sector in universities, colleges, schools, they created generation after generation of indoctrinated minds. They reached the critical mass in 1960s because they moved to America in 1930s. For the next 30 years, they reached a critical mass. And in 1960s, there was a big students' movement. It was a leftist movement, primarily in America and France, and also in other parts of Europe. That was a time when the hippie movement started. If some of you might remember that the entire hippie culture, that was a part of this. It was unleashed by the student movements in 1960s. And when these movements ended, it was very, very disruptive and anarchist movement. When these movements ended and when the students came back, these Frankfurt School professors told them they had become their idols by that time, ideological superheroes by that time. So they told these students that now you should cut your hair, wear your suits, and enter and infiltrate various institutions. So they entered Hollywood, they entered media, they entered education, they entered bureaucracy, they entered legal system. So practically all these systems that control narrative as well as life in any society, they were infiltrated by these people, university educated, and they are the ones who have now taken this entire woke narrative to such a level that it is impossible to even utter a word against this. How did they achieve their objective of breaking down institutions or in collapsing the institutions? Let's take a few examples one by one. The biggest target was family, as I told you. So destroy the family. They used 4 different tactics. First was extreme individualism. And this is something where even the right collaborated with them. Because individualism led to breaking of the family. Breaking of the family led to more number of households. More the number of households, more the requirement for apartments, more the demand for television sets, washing machines, dishwashers, practically everything. And it gave a big boost to American economy. And that's why the right also loved this. The industry also loved this. And left promoted this because they wanted to break the family. Breaking the family was their main objective. Right's main objective was to make money. So though their basic purposes were different, the route they chose kind of coincided. And that's why both of them tried to promote individualism. But because of that, the social costs that they had to pay, the psychological destruction and alienation that happened in the society, that they never understood because leftists didn't want to understand and the rightists didn't care to understand. So finally what happened is extreme individualism has driven the Western society and Western culture to the brink of collapse. That was number one. Number two was perverted feminism. When the feminist movement started in America, it started for the right reasons and was started by the right people. Because American women didn't have the right to vote. they were definitely treated as second citizens. So in 1920s, this movement started, and it started for the right reasons. The women who started this also had right ideas. They wanted a free, fair, and just world, and that was absolutely fair, and that was absolutely desirable. But that is the strategy of the left, that whatever movements are started by ordinary people, for their justified reasons, just reasons, they jump into it, give it an anarchist turn, give it a violent turn, and completely derail those movements. So their basic purposes are forgotten, and the very reason for their existence of these movements is just to create conflict. So similarly, sometime during the 1960s, and they gave it a completely anarchist turn, and they positioned it like a war between men and women. So justice for women was forgotten, and the entire focus was on conflict. And again, in fact, I'm tempted to read out something from the book, that how this feminist movement really got derailed. There was a communist lady called Kate Millett, who became the leader of this entire feminist movement. And she was a perverted mind. And her sister has given her a report on one particular meeting where Kate Millett and 12 of her colleagues had assembled in a house. And Kate, I mean, they did it like a consciousness rising ceremony, which is a peculiarity of Mao's China. And in this ceremony, they were saying it like a church prayer. So Kate Millett was asking a question, and all 12 of them was answering in one voice. So I'll just read out what those questions and answers, and you will understand what kind of perversion was introduced in the feminist movement. So she asked, "Why have we assembled here?" They answered, "To make revolution." What kind of revolution? Cultural revolution. How are we going to implement this revolution? By destroying American family. Very clear. How are we going to destroy the American family? By destroying the head of the family, who is a man. How are we going to destroy the man? By making him lose his power. How will we do that? By free sex, prostitution, and transgenderism, same-sex activities. So transgenderism, what we are seeing today in the United States and the Western world, is not something which has happened automatically. It has not happened over a period of time as a natural progression, but it has happened. So perverted feminism was the second one. Third was sexual revolution. Sexual revolution again started in 1960s. And it was something which was introduced by these Frankfurt University professors. They created a very scholarly theory around it. They said that because of free sex, there will be love all around. The conflicts will end. Hate will end. This kind of very rosy picture they created. And they said that free sex should be our target, and we should introduce it in the society because it will lead to everything good. And exactly opposite happened. It led to alienation, it led to frustration, it led to psychological disorders, it led to diseases of all kinds, and it led to the destruction of family, most importantly, because that was their main purpose. And the fourth and one which is I'm going to spend a little more time on was transgenderism. This was the fourth weapon that they used to destroy the family. Now, transgenderism is something we all know that male and female are two distinct biological realities. Nature has created man and woman because man has certain genitals, woman has certain genitals. Man has XX pair of XY pair of chromosomes. Women have XX pair of chromosomes. Man produces sperms. Women produce ova. So it's nature's creation that man and women are two distinct identities. But the critical theory says that gender of a woman, of a person, is different from sex. Actually, sex and gender being the same is the rule of nature, is the law of nature. Sometimes, in very rare cases, it happens that a person who is born as a man has more feminine feelings, and person who is born as a female has got more manly feelings and manly traits. But this is something which happens naturally only 0.02% of the cases. But these people have converted this exception into a rule. They are saying that in every person, sex and gender can be different. And their theory is that gender is given to a person at birth, which means it's a socially imposed identity only. Gender is not a natural phenomenon, but it's a socially imposed identity that is given to you by your parents and your doctors at birth. So natural corollary to this is that you should be free to choose whatever gender you want, because why should you live with something which is imposed on you? And next step is they say that a person knows which gender he actually wants when that person is only 3 or 4 years old. So what they are doing now is they're in preschool itself, they're teaching students that you can choose whatever gender you want. You need not live with whatever gender has been given to you by your parents. A 12-year-old girl, for example, if she wants to get a sex change procedure done, then she can take hormonal injections, she can undergo sex change surgery, for which in many states of America, she doesn't need her parents' permission. 12-year-old. Same for the boys also. So they're free to choose whatever gender they want, they're free to get whatever gender they want. Their parents can't interfere. In schools, women, actually men who have declared themselves as women, transgender women, they are called to the school to tell stories to children. They come with big breasts, knuckly breasts, short skirts, very heavy makeup, and then they tell stories to the students. So this is actually salesmanship of transgenderism. They're encouraging people to become transgenders. If a person declares himself to be a woman, then he has to be allowed to use women's washrooms, because otherwise you will be, affecting his transgender rights. So that is something very sacrosanct. But women's rights to privacy has got no value. Transgender rights are important. As I told you initially, if a rapist who is a man and is convicted, if he says that I'm a woman, I feel I'm a woman, that's all. You don't need to give any biological evidence. Asking for a biological evidence stamps you with the stamp of homophobe. And as I told you, once you get a stamp like this, you are cancelled. Then your entire career is over. So nobody dares to ask for any biological evidence. So then that rapist has to be accommodated inside a women's cell. You can imagine what kind of danger we are imposing on those women inside the prison. But this is happening. I mean, if you go to Google and check Ted Cruz questioning a judge, that judge had ordered that that person has to be kept in a women's cell. If a man feels that he's a woman, he must be allowed to participate in women's sports. So the entire world of women's sports that women sportsmen have so judiciously created over last 100 years is collapsing. Because you can imagine a man enters a shot put tournament just because he feels that he's a woman. Women have no chance of winning against him. But that is happening and you can't stop it. And because of this, there is a huge conflict being created between parents and their children. Because children do everything without parents' permission. When parents come to know that something like this is happening or has happened, you can imagine what kind of reaction they must be having. And the woke terror is so much that no medical professional, no psychologist, no counselor is willing to help the parents to treat their children. Because every such feeling need not be genuine. With little counseling, little handling with sensitivity can settle these issues. But such counseling, such treatment, no one is willing to do. Because if a counselor does it, if a psychiatrist does it, he will be cancelled. And he's terribly scared of getting cancelled. Now, beyond this, there is something called as queer. Queer is someone who doesn't identify himself as a man or a woman, but you can identify yourself as anything. So, for example, in Australia, one girl said that she identifies herself with a cat. So she started walking on all fours, started making meow sounds. I'm sure some of you must have seen 25 odd young boys and girls in Germany at night shouting like dogs because they identified themselves with dogs. Again, in Australia, 4 girls said that they identify themselves with foxes and they created holes inside their school uniforms to make way for their tails. So Willy Munzenberg had said that I'll make the Western civilization stink. That prophecy has actually been actualized. Western civilization is really stinking because this queer business is nothing other than the collapse of the family system as well as the collapse of the Western culture. And that has been most striking and most worrying part is this has not happened naturally. Again and again, I'm repeating this, that this has not happened naturally. This has been planned and implemented with a long-term vision and long-term commitment. And that is where this civilization has come now. So destruction of family because of extreme individualism, perverted feminism, sexual revolution, and transgenderism. Then education. Education, again, is another area which they wanted to target and which they wanted to destroy. As I told you, that first took control of the institutions that taught teachers. Now they wanted to use education to destroy patriotism because the feeling of patriotism is created sometime in your student days, mostly in school. So they introduced something called as the 1619 project. Now we all know that America got independence in 1776 from the British. And then their founding fathers created the Declaration of Independence, and America was created as a free nation. And Americans are very proud of this history. But the woke brigade has said that America was not created in 1776, but it was created in 1619. Why in 1619? Because that was the year when the first batch of black slaves landed in America. So what they want to tell the students is that the only identity of your country is slavery. Your country has no other identity, and that's why you should hate your history. You should hate your country. Because your country is all about discrimination. It is all about oppression. It is all about slavery. Now, every country has made some mistakes in the past. America has also made some mistakes. Slavery was definitely a mistake. There is no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that only slavery can be the identity of that country. Similarly, they want to make untouchability as the only identity of India, casteism as the only identity of India, patriarchy as the only identity of India. So they want to project India as a nation which is discriminatory, which is oppressive. In Western world, they attack Christianity. In India, they attack Hinduism. So these are the tactics that they use everywhere to make sure that the people of that country, the children of that country, the youth of that country, hate their country. They feel ashamed of their country. Because ultimately, they want all the national borders to collapse, to make the whole world one, and then rule and control the entire world. This totalitarian ideology is something for which family is a problem, impediment, religion is an impediment, patriotism is an impediment. So patriotism is something that they really target. And for that, they use education as a weapon. Then the next weapon that they have used is infiltrating the corporates. So in the corporate sector, they now conduct audits on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how many blacks have you appointed? How many women have you appointed? How many transgenders have you appointed? All those audits are conducted and scores are given. And the companies that don't fall into their expectations, they are charged in courts for not giving enough, for not having enough diversity. And especially this is being used as a weapon against Indians, because we know that Indian boys and girls go to United States and occupy very good positions in corporates, IT companies, and many other companies. So they are now trying to propagate that all this is happening because of Brahminical privilege. They are saying that only Brahmins are getting jobs, nobody else is getting jobs. So they do audits of companies and find out how many people of what caste have been appointed. So they're introducing the element of caste in the minds of Indians who are working in the United States. Generally, according to the American law, race is the basis on which you can file suits for discrimination. Now they are saying that caste should also be included as a basis for filing suits against discrimination. And something like this has already been done by the city of Seattle. And this was piloted by none other than one Indian called Kshama Sawant, who calls herself a Leninist and Trotskyite communist. Now something like this also happening in California, about to happen in California. So once all the states accept caste as a basis of discrimination, then more and more cases will be filed against Indians. And the flames of casteism will be inflamed in the entire United States. And the Indian diaspora will be made to fight amongst each other. They had filed a suit against a company called Cisco against two particular boys from India, saying that they have discriminated against a Dalit boy. And there was a huge publicity given to this case. Actually, finally, the courts dismissed this case, saying that no discrimination has been done. In fact, that Dalit boy was interviewed by those two boys, Indian boys, and they were the ones who selected him, and they were the ones who gave him the opportunity. But finally, the 2 or 3 years that the case lasted, there was so much bad publicity for India, saying that India is such a discriminatory country. India is such a oppressive country. There is a lady called Ajanta Subramanian who has written a book called The Caste of Merit, saying that IITs are the factories of Brahminical privilege. So they know that most of the young people going from India and occupying the best positions and being heads of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, many of them are IIT graduates. So they're attacking IITs. And they're saying that these are the factories of Brahminical privilege. There is a lady called Isabel Wilkerson who has written a book called Caste, the Origin of Our Discontent, which says that the basis of any equality anywhere in the world, may it be based on race or may it be based on men, women or whatever, any equality anywhere in the world, it originates from India's caste system. So it's such a nonsensical and laughable statement that there is absolutely no connection between race and caste. That's a completely different subject altogether, which again I have espoused. But this book was promoted by Oprah Winfrey, who is a star TV anchor. And for a long time, it was New York Times bestseller. So you can imagine what kind of bad publicity India has got. And all this is again being done deliberately because India is their next target. America was targeted first, and now they have brought it to the brink of collapse. Now they are targeting India because India is rising. India is going to be the next power. And to stop this rise, now they are attacking India. They want to create more and more fault lines in India, create more and more conflict in India, leading to anarchy and destruction. That is a clear-cut agenda and clear-cut objective that they are having, and they are working very methodically in the woke manner. There is an institution called Equality Labs, which has been created in America by Theni Moses Sundararajan. All these are Indians, unfortunately, but under the woke influence. So they again try to do various surveys of various institutions and see how many people of what caste are given opportunities there. People who work in America, they are now telling that their students, their children come back from school and ask their parents, to which caste do we belong? So the idea of caste is being introduced in their minds of young children, just to make sure that Indians don't get over the feeling of caste differences. Instead of trying to make people forget the caste, they are trying to remind people to what caste they belong. And in our own country, we also see that caste-based census people want to do. Recently, our Chief Justice said that men and women are not two distinct biological entities. I'm sure many of you must have read this. This is straight out of the woke textbook. I don't know whether he has really studied and whether he really knows what he is talking about. But if he does, then it's so dangerous that we can imagine to what extent wokeism has already infiltrated in our country. In the recent past, already there are proposals in the education system that these ideas of gender diversity should be taught from the school level. We don't want this to come into our country because we know that where it is going to lead. Unless we learn from what has happened in the West, we will continue to make the same mistakes, and we will never. We are in the great danger of losing our culture, losing our identity, and losing our existence finally. And the biggest problem is that all this happens behind very, very attractive masks, as I told you. That they say that the entire presentation is so righteous and so virtue signaling that people get attracted to it, because people feel that this is good, this is social justice, this is transgender justice, this is inclusiveness, this is environment justice, this is women's rights. Who wants to fight against women's rights? Or who wants to fight against environment justice? Who wants to deny social justice? But these are only the masks. Behind this, the face is very, very vicious. And objective and target is destruction of the entire human civilization, because that is something which left has always declared openly. They have not hidden these things from all of us. Only thing is that we don't take it seriously. Either we don't know it, or we don't take it seriously, or we believe that something like this will never happen. And that is why these things happen. But now there is a living example in front of us of America and Western Europe, how they have been driven to the brink of collapse. Now, I believe more or less I've covered whatever I wanted to cover. I think if there are any questions, we can take that.
Thank you for the lecture, sir. I would request the audience to reach out to the bottom pane, select the reactions button, and ask their questions, if any. Alternately, you can also write down your questions in the chat box and I can ask sir about them. As we wait for those questions to come up, I have a few questions of my own. Sir, Bhavish Agarwal, Ola CEO, has recently launched Krutrim. He's exited from Azure. And he says that he's done it because LinkedIn had removed his post, which talked about the poison of pronouns shouldn't come into India. So, do you think that that is indicative of how leftism has sort of bullied its way into Indian corporate structures? And now that startups have started to come out from India themselves, our entrepreneurs feel lesser pressure to, succumb to such demands of the left ideology swaying within the American corporates that may be funding such startups.
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's a very good example that you have quoted, that Bhavish Agarwal asked LinkedIn AI, artificial intelligence, about himself. He knew that he wanted to find out what the AI would say about himself. And while talking about him, because being a well-known person, AI knew who Bhavish Agarwal was. And while talking about him, they kept on mentioning him as they, referring to him as they instead of he, because that is the woke fashion of using gender neutral pronouns. So when you say he, it means a man. But a man may not think that he is a man. He may think that he's a woman, and then you are impinging on his transgender rights. So you must use gender neutral pronouns. So they use gender neutral pronoun they. So Bhavi said that this is nonsense. I don't want to be referred as they. I'm a man, I should be referred as he. Who told you to refer to me as they? And when he made such posts, the LinkedIn simply removed his posts instead of, without asking him, without taking his permission. So this was kind of denying him his freedom of expression. And if tech platforms under the woke influence deny this freedom to you, then your dependence on tech platforms is a problem, because they can shut you up anytime. They are so all pervasive, and we are so dependent on them, that this kind of policing or this kind of gagging needs to be protested. And that's what Bhavish did. He said that it's time that India should think of having our own tech platforms. China has done that. I mean, many countries in the world are now waking up to this threat of wokeism. And France has said that we don't want this wokeism. France has said that whether a person is oppressed or not, whether a person is victim or not, we will decide on the basis of case-to-case basis, on individual basis. We will not declare a particular group as oppressed. So they completely denied the fundamentals of wokeism, because fundamental of wokeism is that certain groups are oppressed, and then they can never be wrong. France said that no, we'll decide case to case, person to person. Italy has gone one step further. Italy says that they have gone to such a desperate level that they said that we don't want English language only. They said that because all these woke ideas come through English language. So they're saying that English may be a great language and source of latest modern technology and knowledge, but we don't want it because we don't want these woke ideas that destroy our Italian culture. It's a culture war. We must understand that this entire woke theory is attack on your culture, and they want to destroy all individual cultures, make world into one big whole, and then rule the world with woke ideology. So you should not follow anything else. You should just give up your individual identities. You must immerse yourself into a woke identity, and automatically you become Marxist. The whole idea is that if I tell you Marxism is good and you accept Marxism, you will not accept it. But through the woke route, if I tell you, you start finding wokeism very attractive, you go on accepting it, then you stop saying certain things. You stop talking about certain things. You go on accepting only a few things. And in the process, you automatically become a Marxist. So that is the whole idea. Without even knowing that you have become a Marxist, you are a Marxist. That's how they have captured the entire Democratic Party of the United States. America, we feel that it's a capitalist country and Marxism can never be present there. But the entire, out of the two parties of USA, one party is fully Marxist, actually. So that is and that's why China, right from the beginning, has said that we will not have tech platforms in the United States, because through that, all these ideas of wokeism and other ideas infiltrate. So China has its own tech platforms. Maybe sooner or later we'll also have to think on those terms. It's very difficult. It's very challenging, but maybe we'll be required to do that, because otherwise, positioning India as oppressor, positioning India as patriarchal, positioning India as casteist, it will continue because that is their whole agenda.
That is true. In fact, most of us in India are Android users, and Google Chrome becomes therefore our default search engines. And their recent Gemini effort has showed how their ideologies within the tech world have caused Gemini to fail miserably, because it could only generate pictures of African Americans and not in any other race. However, my question talks about a more Indian form of wokeism that I have seen recently, which is this very shocking unwelcoming of segregation of non-vegetarian and vegetarians, whether it is in restaurants or it is in hostels and PGs where pure vegetarians are given a separate table and the non-vegetarians are not supposed to go and sit there, which I think is a very good practice, and it's a very Indian practice and should remain. Now, IIT Bombay had attacked a few Jain students and Hindu students who used to demand such segregation and make the most out of it. And in the same way, Sudha Murthy had made a statement about how she makes sure to, have food only from Indian restaurants when she does go abroad, because everyone else, you don't know in what utensils they're making food. They're probably making it in the same ones that they make the non-vegetarian food in. And this form of segregation has suddenly seen a lot of backlash in India, especially among the youth, which I think is another sign of wokeism.
Very much. Because again, as I told you, that they want to incite conflicts. And this is one more fault line, which is they find very, very attractive, that they can create huge conflict across this fault line. And again, it falls in their entire narrative like a set piece, then you can call it Brahminical. You can call it Brahminical Puritanism. So the entire narrative that they want to create about India being dominated by Brahminical ideas and Brahminical patriarchy. So this fits in like absolute perfectly in their entire narrative, and that's why they have taken it up with gusto, and they're using it as a new fault line where they can create huge conflict, and they can integrate this conflict with the bigger casteist narrative that they want to create.
Sir, the manifesto of Congress for the recent elections has had a mention of how same-sex marriages would be something that they would support if they did come into power. And same-sex marriages has circulated through the Supreme Court trials as well, into the discourse of a lot of mainstream Indian channels and a lot of people's conversations personally as well. So, how as Indians are we to navigate something like same-sex marriage in a way where we do not let an infiltration of wokeism happen, but at the same time also facilitate the community of the Indian LGBTQ?
Actually, wherever the feeling is natural and genuine, we should respect it. Is what, and in our culture, there it has always been respected. We have given them a separate place in our society as kinners. They have some special privileges which no one else has. So they are treated with respect. They are given a sources of livelihood, and they are given a special identity. And similarly, whenever there is a genuine case, wherever there is a naturally occurring case, they must not be persecuted, or they must not be troubled, and they must be given respect and freedom to live the way they want to. But creating this entire fashion of transgenderism is something that we have to guard against. That is what is happening in the Western world. The number of girls declaring themselves as transgenders is increasing geometrically. Like I've given some figures, I don't remember them offhand, but I think in last 10 years, it has increased by 4,400%, which is mind-boggling. I mean, this can never be natural. This, because we know that natural percent is generally 0.02%. But there are many reasons why. I'll just briefly discuss this. Why young boys and girls, especially girls, want to declare themselves as transgenders. One reason is being a cisgender, means being someone who accepts his natural gender, or the gender given at birth, as they say, as his or her acceptable gender. Is called as a cisgender. And cisgenders are supposed to be oppressors who bully transgenders, whether they actually bully or not, but just by being a cisgender, you become an oppressor. And nobody wants to belong to an oppressor class or oppressor group. That is one reason. Another reason is that right from the school itself, students are taught that white people are privileged. There is a white privilege. And you can imagine 5 or 6 year old students, especially girls, because girls are more sensitive. They are under so much pressure and pressure of guilt that being white, they have been the oppressors, and for last hundreds of years they have oppressed black people. And under the pressure of that guilt, they always want to find some. I mean, they can't get rid of their whiteness. That is something you cannot change. So they want to get some identity which is oppressed, as an escape from this guilt. And the oppressed identity that they can very easily get or own is being a transgender. So they declare themselves as trans. And once they do that, they become heroes in the school. Then their peers and their teachers, everybody start saying, oh, what a courageous person that she has accepted that she is a trans and all that. So suddenly you become a hero. So you escape from the guilt, you get the status of a hero, your peers start looking up to you, and then others also think that let me also declare myself as transgender, because this is a good escape from the stamp of being an oppressor. Think of it from the point of view of a child who is 6 years old. For them, they can't think of anything else to escape this. So that is how it is growing. And some social scientists are now saying that this is no more uh, a statement of your sexual identity, but it has become a statement of your ideology. So it has become a part of leftist ideology to declare yourself as a transgender. For all these reasons, the number of people calling themselves as trans is increasing so rapidly and so ferociously. And something like this happening in India is something we definitely don't want. So same-sex marriage in principle, I mean, maybe there can be difference of opinions, but same-sex marriage is a very complicated thing because there are many laws which are involved. So applying those laws or interpreting those laws will become impossible if you allow same-sex marriages. Then what will happen? How will you solve those problems? So there are many complications, and that's why I am of the personal opinion that people can have same-sex relationships if they really genuinely feel that way. And nobody should trouble them, nobody should harass them. But same-sex marriages is something that has to be further given a lot of thought.
Thank you very much, sir. That was a very interesting question answer session. We hope to have more such talks with you. And you have made it a very insightful weekend, something that can be thought about the entire day. And I would encourage all of our viewers to go ahead and order Termites and also Asatyamev Jayate. Those are two books which are very good beginner guides to navigating your way through Indic revivalism, as well as understanding the various things that are happening in the guise of progressive ideologies. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.